The lawyer slid the document across the table and asked me one question. Are you sure you want to do this, Thomas? I looked at the paper. I looked at the two names printed at the bottom, my own children, and for the first time in 67 years, my hand did not shake when I picked up the pen. That moment had actually begun 11 months earlier, on a quiet Tuesday morning, when the phone rang and my daughter said 4 words that split my life clean in half. To understand how a father ends up sitting across from his attorney, rewriting his entire estate, I need to take you back to where it started. Back to the silence. Back to the morning I stopped being needed by the only two people I had left in this world. My name is Thomas Edward Caldwell. I am 67 years old. I live in a small house on Briar Hill Road in Millbrook, Virginia, a town so quiet you can hear the church bells from 3 streets over if the wind blows right. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer for the Army Corps of Engineers. I designed load-bearing systems for bridges in places most people will never see on a map. I retired 8 years ago with a modest pension, a bad knee, and a 1994 Ford pickup that still starts on the first turn every single morning. I have a blue-tick coonhound named Bo who sleeps at the foot of my bed and follows me to the diner every day like I owe him something. I eat the same breakfast at the same table at Ellen's Kitchen every morning. 2 eggs over easy, rye toast, black coffee. Ellen herself still pours my cup because she says nobody else gets the level right. I fix porches for my neighbors. I sharpen lawnmower blades in my garage. I replace screen doors and patch leaky faucets and never charge a dime for any of it. Folks around here think I am just a quiet old man who's good with tools. I prefer it that way. Nobody in Millbrook knows about the bridges. Nobody knows about the commendations. Nobody knows that a file cabinet in my basement holds letters from 3 different governors thanking me for infrastructure work that kept entire towns connected during flood seasons. My wife knew. Margaret knew everything. She was the only person who ever saw the full version of me and loved every piece of it without asking me to perform. Maggie died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, the slow kind. The kind that lets you watch someone disappear 1 pound at a time while you sit beside the bed pretending the soup you brought is going to make a difference. She had a saying. She used to press her palm flat against my chest, right over my heart, and say it every time I tried to control something I could not fix. You cannot hold the river with your hands, Thomas. Let it flow and trust that the water knows where it belongs. I heard those words 100 times during our marriage. I did not understand them until she was gone. After Maggie died, the house became a museum of small absences. I still made coffee for 2 every morning for the first 4 months. I still reached across the bed at night and found nothing but cold sheets and the faint ghost of her lavender soap on the pillow. I talked to the empty kitchen chair where she used to sit with her reading glasses pushed up into her hair. I told that chair about my day. I told it about the weather. I told it I missed her. Bo would tilt his head and look at me like he understood. Maybe he did. Dogs know grief better than people. They do not try to fix it. They just stay. I had 2 children, Emma and Daniel. Emma is 34. Daniel is 31. They were everything to me after Maggie passed. Emma teaches 4th grade at a public school in Richmond. She has her mother's face and her mother's patience. Daniel works in marketing for a tech firm up in Northern Virginia. He is sharp and ambitious and restless in a way that reminds me of myself at his age. For 3 years after the funeral, we were close. Sunday phone calls, holiday dinners at my kitchen table. Emma would bring her potato salad and Daniel would bring a bottle of wine he knew nothing about, and we would sit around the same oak table where Maggie used to carve the turkey and pretend the empty chair did not echo. It was not perfect, but it was ours. Then Victor arrived. Emma met Victor Ashworth at a conference in Washington. He was 38, a real estate developer with offices in 3 cities. Tall, clean-shaven, the kind of man who wears a watch that costs more than my truck. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. The first time Emma brought him to Millbrook for dinner, he shook my hand firmly, complimented my workshop, and spent 20 minutes asking me about bridge engineering with what seemed like genuine curiosity. I wanted to like him. I tried hard to like him. For Emma's sake, I gave him every benefit I had. Maggie would have told me to look closer. I should have listened sooner. But love makes you want to believe the best version of people, especially when your daughter is smiling wider than she has in years. I did not realize it then, but none of us sitting at that table understood what the next 11 months would bring. The first sign came at Thanksgiving. Victor and I were standing in the kitchen while Emma pulled the bird out of the oven. He picked up a framed photograph of me and Maggie from the windowsill, the one taken at Shenandoah the summer before she got sick. He looked at it for a long moment and then set it back down with a small laugh. You know, Thomas, you have got this whole rustic widower aesthetic really dialed in. The old truck, the dog, the diner routine. It's charming, honestly. Like a Hallmark movie with worse lighting. He smiled when he said it. The words themselves could pass for a joke. But something in the way he placed that photo back down, face tilted slightly away from the window light, told me he was not joking. He was categorizing. I said nothing. I picked up the carving knife and started slicing the turkey. A man who labels your grief as an aesthetic is not a man who has ever grieved. I kept that thought to myself. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, I hope you will stay with me. Subscribe to this channel so stories like this keep reaching the people who need to hear them. The second sign came at Christmas. Victor arrived in a new car, something German and sleek that looked like it belonged on a different planet than my gravel driveway. Daniel was there too, and the four of us sat around the table eating Emma's roast and exchanging gifts. Victor handed me a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover. "For your memoirs," he said, grinning at Emma like they had rehearsed this. "Every old engineer has stories worth writing down before they, start forgetting them. I held that journal in my hands and felt my jaw tighten. Emma laughed nervously, the way you laugh when someone says something that lands wrong but you are not sure you are allowed to say so. Daniel glanced at me and then looked away. I thanked Victor for the gift. I set the journal on the shelf beside Maggie's reading glasses. I never opened it. There is a difference between honoring someone's history and patronizing it. Victor did not know the difference, or maybe he did and simply did not care. The third sign came in February. Emma called me on a Sunday afternoon the way she always did, but her voice was different. Thin, careful, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. "Dad, Victor thinks maybe we should space out the visits a little. He says it's important for us to build our own traditions as a couple. He does not mean anything bad by it. He just thinks the every Sunday call thing is a little much." I stared at the kitchen wall for a long time after she hung up. Bo pressed his nose against my knee. The clock on the wall ticked 11 times before I moved. A man who asks your daughter to call her widowed father less often is not building traditions. He is building walls, and he is using her hands to lay the bricks. The fourth sign came in April. Emma and Victor hosted a small dinner party at their townhouse in Richmond. Daniel was there, a few of Victor's business associates. I drove 2 hours in the rain to attend. When I arrived, Victor opened the door and looked at my boots, still damp from the walk up the path. "We just had the floors redone," he said. "Italian hardwood. You mind leaving those at the door?" I took off my boots and walked into my daughter's home in my socks. I sat at the table while Victor poured wine for his colleagues and talked about interest rates and zoning permits. He did not introduce me once. When one of his associates asked who I was, Victor said, "That is Emma's father. He is retired." He did not say my name. He did not mention engineering. He did not mention 31 years of service. Just retired, like a tool that had been put back in the shed. Emma sat at the other end of the table, and I watched her glance at me twice with something behind her eyes that looked like an apology she could not say out loud. Daniel sat beside Victor, laughing at his jokes, nodding along to his opinions about the market like he was taking notes in a lecture hall. Something cold settled into my stomach that night. Not anger, something quieter, recognition. I had seen this pattern before, decades ago, when a senior officer slowly turned an entire unit against a capable lieutenant by whispering just enough doubt into the right ears at the right times. Victor was not attacking me. He was repositioning me, moving me from father to inconvenience. One dinner, one comment, one redefined tradition at a time. And my children were helping him do it without even knowing what they were building. The fifth sign was the one that kept me awake at night. It was June. I had driven to Richmond to surprise Emma for her birthday. I brought a small cake from the bakery in Millbrook, the same lemon pound cake Maggie used to make every year. I knocked on her door and she opened it with a smile that collapsed the instant she saw me. "Dad, you should have called first." Her voice was tight. She glanced over her shoulder. Behind her, the hallway table was covered in moving boxes. "Are you moving?" I asked. Her eyes darted sideways. "Victor found us a bigger place, closer to his office. It's just easier." "When were you going to tell me?" She did not answer. She stood in the doorway of her own home, and she could not look at me. And right there, under the porch light, I saw it. Her hands were trembling, not from cold, not from surprise. The tremble of someone who has been told what to say and is terrified of saying the wrong thing. I drove home that night on dark country roads with the untouched cake on the passenger seat and a pressure building behind my eyes that I refused to release. Bo was waiting at the door when I got back. He followed me to the kitchen. I sat at the table and stared at that cake until midnight. Something was deeply wrong with my daughter, and every instinct I had, every instinct Maggie would have trusted, was screaming at me to act, but I did not know how. Not yet. I had no idea that within 3 weeks the decision would be made for me. The call came on a Thursday morning in July. I was sitting on my porch with Bo, drinking coffee, watching the mist rise off the field behind my house the way it does every summer before the heat sets in. My phone rang. It was Daniel. I picked up on the second ring. "Hey, son?" "Dad, listen." His voice was flat, rehearsed. "Emma and I have been talking, and we think it's best if you stop calling us for a while. We need space. Victor says you have a pattern of inserting yourself into situations where you are not needed. And honestly, we agree. We love you, but we need you to stop calling. Just stop." I held the phone against my ear and listened to the cicadas in the yard. 4 seconds of silence. 5, 6. "Dad? Did you hear me?" "I heard you," I said. My voice was steady. My hand was not. "Okay, well, we will reach out when we are ready." He hung up. I set the phone on the porch railing and stared at it like it was a thing I had never seen before. Bo pressed his head against my leg. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. I sat there for over an hour. The mist burned off. The field turned gold in the morning light. Birds called from the tree line. The world kept moving, the way worlds do, completely indifferent to the fact that something inside a 67-year-old man had just quietly broken. My children had asked me to stop calling, so I stopped. But I did not sit still. 3 days later, I drove to my basement and opened the old cedar chest that sits beneath the workbench. The smell hit me immediately. Cedar and dust and time. Maggie's letters were on top, bundled in a blue ribbon she had tied herself before her hands became too weak. Beneath them were my service commendations. Beneath those, the original blueprints of the Harmon Creek Bridge, the one I designed in 1989 that survived 3 consecutive 100-year floods without a single structural failure. And at the very bottom, a manila folder containing the full documentation of the Caldwell Family Trust. I sat on the basement floor with that folder open across my knees, and I heard Maggie's voice as clearly as if she were standing beside me. "You cannot hold the river with your hands, Thomas. She was right. She was always right. I had been trying to hold my children in place with love and consistency and presence, but they had chosen to flow somewhere I could not follow. And the man standing at the other end of that current, the man redirecting them with whispers and watches and Italian hardwood, had no idea who he was really dealing with. Before I continue, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me what city you are watching from. I read every single one of them, and knowing you are out there keeps these stories alive. I did not act out of anger. I want to be clear about that. I called my old friend Martin Prescott first. Martin and I served together during my early years with the Corps. He became a family attorney in Charlottesville after he retired. We had not spoken in months. He picked up on the third ring. "Thomas Caldwell, I was just thinking about you last Tuesday. Martin, I need to see you. It's about the trust. It's about my children." He did not ask questions. He just said, "Thursday morning, my office. Bring everything." There is a kind of man, who hears the weight in your voice and does not waste time asking what it means. Martin is that kind of man. I spent the next 2 days preparing, not with anger, with precision. The same precision I used to calculate load distributions on a bridge that had to hold weight it was never designed for. I pulled every document, every co-signed loan, every guarantee I had quietly placed beneath my children's financial lives like invisible steel beams nobody ever sees. Emma's mortgage, I was the guarantor. Daniel's car loan, co-signed. The startup capital for Victor's newest development project, a mixed-use building in Fredericksburg. I had provided a personal guarantee on the construction loan as a favor to Emma, who had asked me with tears in her eyes 6 months earlier, saying it was the one thing that would make Victor respect our family. I had signed it because I loved my daughter. I had signed it because I still believed she was in there somewhere, behind the careful voice and the trembling hands and the rehearsed distances. And now I was going to honor my children's wish. They wanted me to stop. So I was going to stop everything. Thursday morning, I sat across from Martin in his office in Charlottesville. The room smelled like old leather and coffee. He read through every document for 45 minutes without saying a word. Then he looked up at me over his glasses. "You are the structural foundation of their entire financial existence," he said. "They do not know that, do they? They know I signed some papers. They do not know what those papers are holding up." Martin nodded slowly. "What do you want to do, Thomas?" "I want to honor their request. They asked me to remove myself from their lives. I want to remove myself completely. Every guarantee, every co-signature, every financial tie, and the trust. I want to rewrite it." "The trust is significant, Thomas. We are talking about your house, the land, your pension distributions, the investment accounts Margaret set up before she passed. Combined, we are looking at just under $1.2 million. I know exactly what it is worth. And the beneficiaries? Were Emma and Daniel. Now I want it redirected. There is a scholarship fund through the Corps of Engineers for children of veterans who died during service. Kids who grew up without a father. Kids who would give anything for one phone call from a man who loved them enough to keep calling even when they did not answer. Martin studied my face for a long time. "You are sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything since the day I married Margaret." He made the note. He did not argue. Good men know when another man has reached a decision that was not made lightly. The paperwork took 2 weeks. During that time, I heard nothing from Emma or Daniel. No calls, no letters, nothing. The silence that had terrified me before now carried a different weight. It felt like confirmation. I had the guarantees withdrawn on a Monday. Emma's mortgage lender received formal notification that my personal guarantee was no longer active. Daniel's auto loan was flagged for review, and the construction loan on Victor's development in Fredericksburg, the one backed entirely by my name and my credit, was frozen pending requalification. I did not make a single phone call to my children. They had asked me to stop. I stopped, but the banks did not stop. Banks never do. The first call came 11 days later. It was Emma. "Dad, something's wrong with the mortgage. The bank says there is a guarantor issue and our rate is being reevaluated. Victor is furious. He says you must have done something." "I honored your request, sweetheart. You and Daniel asked me to remove myself from your lives. I removed myself." Silence on the line. I could hear her breathing. I could hear, somewhere behind her, Victor's voice rising in another room. "Dad, that is not what we meant. It is exactly what you said." I kept my voice level, gentle even, the way you speak to someone you love when you are showing them a truth they are not ready to see. "I love you, Emma, but I cannot hold the river with my hands. Your mother taught me that." I hung up. I sat in my kitchen and I listened to the clock tick and I let the silence sit where it belonged. 3 weeks passed. The consequences moved through their lives like water finding cracks in a foundation. Victor's development loan was called. Without my guarantee, the bank demanded immediate recollateralization. Victor, it turned out, did not have the assets to back it on his own. His 3 offices, his German car, his Italian floors, all of it was leveraged. All of it was built on credit lines and confidence, and the quiet assumption that someone else's name was holding up the structure beneath him. I knew that feeling. I had spent 31 years studying structures. I knew what happened when you removed a load-bearing wall that everyone had forgotten was there. The building does not collapse immediately. It settles. Cracks appear in places nobody expected. And then one night, something gives. The night something gave was October 11th. Victor had organized a gala event at a historic venue in Fredericksburg to celebrate the groundbreaking of his development. 140 guests, local politicians, business partners, press. He stood at the podium in a tailored suit, confident, magnetic, performing for the room the way I had watched him perform at every dinner table he had ever sat at. Emma sat in the front row beside Daniel. She was wearing a dress I had never seen. Her smile was the careful kind, the kind that takes effort to hold. I was not invited. But Martin had received a copy of the guest list through legal channels related to the construction loan review. I arrived at 8:15. I wore my only suit, the one Maggie picked out for me 14 years ago. I walked through the front entrance, and I felt the room shift the way a room does when someone appears who does not belong to the script everyone else is following. Victor saw me from the podium. His smile did not falter. That is the thing about men like Victor. Their confidence is their armor. It does not crack until the very last second. "Thomas," he said into the microphone, smooth as glass. "What a surprise. No, I did not think country living allowed for late nights." Laughter from the crowd, polite, uncertain. I walked to the front of the room. I did not rush. I did not raise my voice. I set a folder on the table beside the podium. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, loud enough for the room to hear, "but I believe Mr. Ashworth's guests deserve to know that the construction loan for this project was frozen 3 weeks ago due to the withdrawal of its primary financial guarantor. That guarantor was me." The room went still. Victor's smile held for 2 more seconds. Then it cracked. Not dramatically, just a small fracture at the corner of his mouth, like a hairline crack in a beam that tells you the whole structure is about to shift. "I also want the room to know," I continued, that Mr. Ashworth has been representing this project as fully funded and independently financed. The documents in this folder show that every major credit facility attached to this development was secured by my personal guarantee, which I provided as a favor to my daughter, a daughter who was later instructed to ask me to stop calling, to stop being part of her life. So I honored that request fully. I did not look at Victor. I looked at Emma. She sat in that front row with her hands in her lap and tears running silently down her face. Not the careful tears of a woman performing, the real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep beneath the ribs where all the things you have been pretending not to feel finally break through the surface. Daniel sat beside her, pale, staring at the folder on the table like it contained the answer to a question he had been too afraid to ask. Victor stepped back from the podium. The confidence was gone, stripped away in 12 seconds by a 67-year-old man in a 14-year-old suit who had spent his entire career making sure structures could bear the weight they were asked to carry. "This is not," Victor started. He stopped. He looked at Emma. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the door. And then he did what men like him always do when the foundation disappears. He looked for someone else to blame. "Emma, I told you to handle this." His voice was sharp. Quick, the mask slipped completely. Not for me, for the room, for every person sitting in those chairs who had just watched a man turn on the woman beside him the moment things stopped going his way. Emma flinched. It was small, barely visible, but I saw it, and so did half the room. That flinch told me everything I needed to know, everything I had spent 11 months trying to understand. My daughter had not pushed me away because she wanted to. She had been positioned, managed, redirected by a man who understood that the easiest way to control someone is to separate them from the people who love them most. I did not shout. I did not threaten. I walked to the front row. I knelt beside my daughter, and I said 5 words that Maggie would have said if she were still here. "You can come home, Emma," she broke. She put her face in her hands, and she broke right there in front of 140 strangers and a man who had spent a year convincing her that her father was the problem. Daniel reached over and put his hand on her shoulder. His face was white. His lips were pressed together so hard they had lost all color. He looked at me, and I saw something I had not seen in his eyes since he was a boy. Recognition, not of who I was, of who he had let himself become. Victor left the venue 14 minutes later without speaking to anyone. His business partners followed him out, but not to support him, to ask questions he did not want to answer. The gala ended early. The development was never completed. Martin told me later that 3 of Victor's investors filed formal inquiries within the week. His offices in 2 of the 3 cities closed by December. I did not celebrate that. I did not feel victory. I felt the way you feel when you watch a structure you warned everyone about finally give way, not satisfaction, just the heavy, tired clarity of being right about something you desperately wished you had been wrong about. The weeks after that night were slow and fragile and sacred. Emma moved back to Millbrook in November. She rented a small cottage on Elm Street, 3 blocks from my house. She started teaching again at the elementary school where she had done her student teaching years before. She came to my kitchen every Sunday morning. She sat in the chair that had been empty for 6 years. She did not say much at first. She did not need to. Some mornings she just sat there with her coffee and looked out the window at the field behind my house and let the silence be what it was. Not absence, rest. Daniel drove down from Northern Virginia every other weekend. He brought firewood in the fall. He helped me patch the porch railing that had been leaning since August. One Saturday afternoon, he stood in my garage watching me sharpen a mower blade and said, without looking at me, "I am sorry, Dad, I did not see it. I should have seen it." I set the blade down. I looked at my son. "You see it now?" I said. "That is what matters." He nodded. His chin trembled once, the way it used to when he was a boy trying not to cry after a scraped knee. He turned back to the workbench and picked up a wrench, and we worked side by side without another word for the rest of the afternoon. Emma's daughter was born the following spring, a girl, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Emma named her Margaret. I held my granddaughter in the same hospital where I had held Emma 34 years earlier. She was warm and impossibly small, and she smelled like milk and cotton and something entirely new. I sat in the chair beside Emma's bed and I felt Maggie's hand on my chest one more time, even though no one was touching me. "You cannot hold the river with your hands, Thomas." She was right. She was always right. But sometimes, if you are patient enough, the river comes back to you on its own. The first time little Margaret reached for my finger and held it, I understood something I had spent my whole life getting wrong. When I was young, I believed strength meant building things that could never fall. I poured myself into bridges and beams and load-bearing walls because I thought permanence was the answer. Then the Corps taught me that real strength is not about what you build. It is about what you are willing to let go of when the ground shifts beneath you. And now, sitting in a hospital room with my granddaughter asleep against my chest and my daughter resting beside me in the afternoon light falling across the same Virginia hills I have loved my entire life, I finally understood what Maggie knew all along. The strongest thing a man can do is not hold on tighter. It is open his hands and trust that what belongs to him will find its way back, not because he forced it, because he was worth returning to. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone you love or someone who once loved you quietly from a distance you did not understand, share it with them. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this, and leave a comment telling me what moment hit you the hardest. Sometimes the people who need these words the most find them through you.